Yes, my book covers a lot of the history of Cerro Torre, which we know kind of began mostly in the 50s with the competition to be the first to climb Cerro Torre, and then came Maestri's famous story from 1959 where he says that they climbed it, he and Tony Yeager, but Tony Yeager did not survive, and Maestri had no proof of his climb. You had to take him at his word, which is a very compelling thought. We would like to believe that everybody is honest, but you know, the case of the world is that since the beginning of humankind, people have told lies, and very clearly Maestri did not climb Cerro Torre in 1959. There is a mountain of evidence. By any objective analysis, he came nowhere close. What's more interesting, I think, than that, because the evidence is very, very clear, what is more interesting is the issue of human belief. How some people still chose to believe this story, which is a fairy tale. It is like I said that just now I went to the moon and back in my homemade spaceship. And you might say, well, wait, Kelly, I saw you here. You were just climbing. Oh, no, before the climb, real fast, I went to the moon and back. You can't prove that I didn't. So it's a little bit crazy. It's funny to think about how human belief operates and the way people will believe certain things, even without any evidence at all, or with contradictory evidence. And I think that story shaped almost everything that came afterward, because based on that, Maestri returned in 1970 with the compressor route, and then that became the most popular route on the mountain and focused all the attention on this controversial route. It had unquestionably a massive influence on everything that happened on that mountain, leading up to and including in 2012, when two young North American climbers, an American named Hayden Kennedy and a Canadian named Jason Kruk, removed Maestri's bolts from the compressor route, and this huge controversy broke out. And really that's what got me interested in the book, actually, because I thought it was so fascinating that these little tiny bolts, which people weren't using as much anymore, you can't even see them until you're right in front of them. But so these guys removed some bolts that everybody agrees never should have been there to begin with. They remove the bolts and the world goes crazy. There's this huge controversy. The reaction seemed outsized in proportion to the action. So the reaction was crazy. So that seemed interesting to me. And so I started researching, started digging, and I found that everything was connected. All these crazy twists and turns throughout history. And I think in a way they became a representation in sorts of human behavior since the beginning of time. We don't always act rationally. I mean, climbing itself is maybe people would say it's not such a rational activity. I mean, so I went and climbed Cerro Torre myself in 2007 with my friend Colin Haley, and you know, it was like a fairy tale world. It was like a fantasy. It was like this magical place. It was completely different from anything I had ever seen. And so in a way, Cerro Torre, with all of its crazy stories, is kind of fitting for the fantasy world that you embark on when you go to Patagonia. So that, in a way, I guess that's what my book... Yeah, without question, it was the 1974 Ragni D'Lecco team, led by Casimiro Ferrari, and that was truly the first ascent of Cerro Torre. I mean, by any rational analysis, there can be no question. If you remove the emotion and you look at the evidence and the facts, it is indisputable. There is no question. But humans don't always like to believe evidence. Sometimes people believe what they want to believe. But yeah, 1974, the Ragni D'Lecco West Face route is truly the first ascent of Cerro Torre, no question.
And for you, the best climb of the Cerro Torre?
Perhaps, you know, the Ragni route in 1974, the first ascent, what an amazing ascent. I mean, for the era, it was incredibly committing, incredibly difficult. That was phenomenal. Man, some of the routes by Hermano Salvatierra and Silvo Caro, oh man, those guys really pushed themselves so hard. It's amazing. And then of course, El Arca de los Vientos in, what was that, November 2005, I think. Truly the first ascent of the northern aspect of Cerro Torre, which was Rolando Garibaldi, who is the greatest historian of Cerro Torre ever, and a great climber. Hermano Salvatierra, who is Mr. Cerro Torre himself, and Alessandro Beltrami. The three of them did a brilliant climb on the north aspect of Cerro Torre, and that was also great. So it's very hard to pick just one. There's many amazing climbs on Cerro Torre, and the weather, it was so different before the weather forecasts came. So around 2005, 2006 or so, weather forecasting came to the Chaltén Massif, where Cerro Torre is, and that changed everything, because before then you had no idea if the storms are coming or not. And the storms, Cerro Torre is so close to the Pacific Ocean, the storms that come in are extremely violent. They come straight off the Pacific and they just hammer the mountains. The storms are legendary and terrifying. And as soon as the weather forecast came, because there's nothing in between the storms and the mountains, so the forecasts are incredibly accurate. They're extremely accurate. They're very rarely wrong. And so they can tell you if the weather is good or the weather is bad. And all of a sudden, immediately, almost overnight, you know, because the forecast came within a year or two, they were really good. All of a sudden, the most terrifying component of climbing in the Chaltén Massif has been removed. You don't go climbing in bad weather now. You would be stupid to go climbing in bad weather. You just wait for a good forecast and go. Everything is different. I think it is so different that I would use the weather forecast as a line, and before then we could say old Patagonia, after weather forecasts, new Patagonia. It's completely different. And both are wonderful. It is still a beautiful place with great climbing.
And your book in French, for you, it's good news?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and for Catherine to be, you know, in charge of publishing, I mean, Catherine Destavel, she's a legend, you know. I mean, she's one of the greatest climbers of all time, and yeah, for me, it's a great honor for my book to be out in French. I worked so hard on the book, it nearly killed me. It's so complicated and so much research, and trying to get the story just right. So for me, it's a great honor to see, especially, you know, because coming from the U.S., I mean, we have such a short history, well, short history of everything, and also a very short history of alpinism. And then you compare it to someplace like France. I mean, the history and the legends who have come from France, to me, yeah, I've always admired European alpinism and the great history, and you know, the Europeans have clearly led the way for all of us, including me. You know, I mean, it's simply a fact. I mean, our climbing has been around for this long. The European history is this long, and so for me to like have my book published in French, it's a great honor. It's very cool.